All right, so we are now on Daniel chapter 11. Now, if you're a history buff, this is probably one of your favorite chapters of the Bible. If you're not, it's probably one of your least favorite chapters of the Bible. This is a very, very cool chapter. And the reason it's very cool is if anyone says you can't prove the Bible, this is one of the chapters which proves you can prove the Bible. And this is because if you connect it to any history book, you cannot deny this wrote history in advance. Now, this particular vision that we're going to see, we are in this last group of visions from Daniel 10 forward, where we're seeing this is at the end of Daniel's life. It's the beginning of the Persian Empire and very early on in the Persian Empire. And God is revealing to Daniel the things that happened in his life, because remember, the vision started under Babylon, and now we're under the Medo-Persian Empire. And he's also going to show him what happens all the way till the times of the end. Okay. So he gives, and again, I find half of this chapter or two-thirds of it to be proof that the Bible's true. So you're going to see a lot of what we consider history, which was clearly prophecy to Daniel. It all hadn't happened yet whenever Daniel heard about it. But now we look back through time and like, wow, this is with meticulous detail about how these things would happen. And then about halfway through, a little over halfway through the chapter, we seem to be talking about something else, something yet future. And Jesus will verify that for us whenever he gives his Olivet discourse. So we'll see how far we get today, if we get through the whole chapter or not. But the first part is going to be, again, a little hard to follow if you are not familiar with the history of the Persian Empire leading into the Greek Empire. Particularly, big section of this is the Empire of Greece after Alexander the Great dies. Now, I did pass around a little paper that essentially shows you what verse, like it's kind of a nice thing I found online. It's not my own work, but I don't know if you guys can see that, but if anybody wants it, I'll email it to you. But essentially, it's just a picture I found online that kind of showed you how the kingdom split. And in each verse, whenever it talks about the different king of the north and king of the south, which would be the active king of the north and king of the south at the time. Okay, so just keep that kind of as reference. But just remember, when it comes to the south, think of Egypt and think of the king's name to be Ptolemy. Anyone else, assume is the king of the north, okay? Whether it be Seleucus or whether it be Antiochus. Okay, so the angel has been talking to Daniel, and again, we presume that angel is Gabriel, doesn't actually say his name here. And we pick up in Daniel 11, verse 1. He says, also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, this is the angel talking, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. Did you hear that correctly? The angel said, I was inspiring this world leader. I was strengthening this world leader. This world leader who's not a Jew. This world leader who's not following the rules of the temple. He is using and inspiring and strengthening the leader of the Medo-Persian Empire. This tells you God will use world leaders. He will use governments. He will use powers to accomplish his purpose. And so this occurs, and we can't always see it. If Gabriel, again, I'm presuming it's Gabriel, is involved in the kingdom of Persia, would we have known it without this verse? You would have known what happened, but you wouldn't know that God was strengthening him. So what does God tell us to do, by the way? We are to pray for our leaders, for our governments, and that there was no rule saying only pray for them if they follow your political party. There's no rule saying only pray for them if you agree with what they're doing. Your job is to pray for them. That doesn't mean you agree with what they're doing. It means you're praying for them. That's it. And when you do pray for them, we see God working. So we get to verse 2. He says, and now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. So this angel is talking about, this is the 3rd year of Cyrus, and he's going back to when Darius was his first year, the first year of being king. And he says from that time forward, there's going to be 4 more Persian kings. The 4th is going to be the richest, and he's going to get the whole world to gather as an army to fight against Greece. So this richest king, he's going to challenge Greece. And Greece is going to go from being a regional power to being a global power as a result of his trials, right? So starting with the reign of Cyrus, which was the first king. And again, you can look at your paper here in a minute. This is not, we're not yet to the Greek Empire. So if we started with Cyrus, we're going to see that the next king was named Cambyses, okay? And he ruled from 529 BC to 522 BC. So about 7 years. And Artaxerxes, okay, was his other name. His brother took the throne for a year and wasn't even considered a king. So that's the first king, okay, Cambyses. The second king was named Darius Hystaspes. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hystaspes. And he was from 521. That's not on there yet. This is before. This is once we get to verse 4, that chart will come into effect. So Darius, the next Darius was 521 to 486 BC. Then you get to Xerxes the first, which is 485 BC to 465 BC. And then we get to a character we know, Artaxerxes Longimanus. Now, this is the son of Xerxes the first, and he's also known by another name that we're more familiar with, Ahasuerus, okay? And he was the guy that was the leader of the Persian Empire during the time of Esther, okay? So during the time of Hadassah is her other name. So it was during his reign that he was just focused and devoted to attacking Greece and taking it over. He was upset with Greece. He wanted to destroy them. So he would gather huge armies, like million people armies, which is huge for that time, the world population, and he would attack Greece, and he could never succeed. So even though he was the richest, even though he was the most powerful, the Greek Empire was much better trained, and they were much more, again, by God's grace, able to withstand them and to overthrow them. So then, now, by the way, the Persian Empire continued beyond this, but after they challenged Greece, Greece began to rise and started to take over different lands. So the Persian Empire kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But the four kings that actually ruled over this global empire, those were the four kings. And then after the king Ahasuerus, it began to diminish. So now we see in verse 3, the Greek Empire rising. So in Daniel 11:3, it says, "And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will." So there's an unstoppable king that arose. Now, if you guys remember earlier in Daniel, we read about a leopard whose feet doesn't touch the ground, who has 4 wings, right? He's so fast, he goes wherever he wants. That's the same guy. We're talking, does anyone remember his name? Alexander the Great, right? And he's known throughout history. Again, a name that is not easily forgotten because of his magnificent feats. He started his career at age 20. He died at age 32. So he conquered the known world in 12 years, which is, again, back then, without modern vehicles, that's a pretty amazing feat. So verse 4, it says, "And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken." So as soon as in the height of his power, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, the 4 directions, okay? And not to his posterity. His kids aren't going to inherit it, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. No one's going to rule the whole property that he ruled, the whole empire that he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So there's going to be 4 people that take over his kingdoms, and the hands are constantly going to change, as we're going to see from that chart that I gave you, okay? So Alexander, he had no heirs except for 2 boys, right? One was an illegitimate child with his mistress, and one was a legitimate child with his wife. But he died before his wife's child was born, okay? And unfortunately, neither of them survived to adulthood. They were both murdered, okay? So from Daniel chapter 7, I already mentioned the leopard with the 4 heads and the 4 wings. So you see how the kingdom splits into 4. Here, we see that the kingdom is going to be split into the 4 winds, right? In Daniel chapter 8, remember there was a single horn broken off the goat, and then all of a sudden 4 new horns went in its place. Again, that same imagery of Alexander's kingdom being split into 4, okay? So that symbolism continues here, and it was split into 4 cardinal directions. So for 22 years, the people of Greece fought with one another, the different generals, and just constantly went back and forth, and after Alexander died. So Daniel, by the way, when he's getting this message, this is years and years before Greece was even on the world stage. People who don't believe the Bible, people who are skeptical of the Bible, they used to say that the book of Daniel must have been written after the Greek Empire. There's no way it was written before. But then they found that it was translated into Greek at the Septuagint. And when it was translated, Daniel chapter 11 was already in there. So that proved it occurred prior to all of this. Does that make sense what I just said? So it proved that this was written before these events happened, so that we know that everything from there forward must have been prophetic. So this was all given to him beforehand. Okay, so then that's why I said the next several verses, they prove the accuracy of the Bible because these prophecies write history from before it happens, right? Okay, so this vision, it's an in-depth look at that he-goat from Daniel chapter 8. I'll have those videos online if anybody doesn't remember that, but that he-goat, we're kind of looking, kind of zoomed in just on that particular animal and the kingdom that it represents. So in this group, we're going to see a little horn that arises from one of these kingdoms. That means a notable person that rises. And later in this chapter, he's called a vile person, the king who does according to his own will. There's a very unique character that is talked about in this chapter. Okay, and we're going to see that references the Antichrist. Okay, so verse 5 says, the king of the south. So you got your little chart. So we have the Ptolemies in the south, the southern kingdom. The king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. So Ptolemy the first, one of the generals, took the southern kingdom of Egypt. Okay. Seleucus, which is over there on the northern kingdom, he took Syria in the Middle East, and he's known as the king of the north. And when we say the phrase king of the north, it can reference any one of those people, depending on which verse you have. Okay, so all those names are all the king of the north. The western kingdoms, as you can see right here, the western kingdoms, they're called Lysimachus. Okay, or excuse me, the Asia Minor was taken by Lysimachus, and Macedonia was taken by Cassander. Now, most of their property was taken over by the kings of Syria, by the northern kingdom. So they actually end up taking most of it, okay? All right, so I know this is going to be hard to keep straight, but just try to follow as we go. So Ptolemy II of Egypt, all right, was extremely powerful. He is the one who actually commissioned the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. That's where we get the Septuagint under his reign, okay? So he's the one that does that. He also, have you guys ever heard of the library at Alexandria? The library is like a very famous library. He also commissioned that. So he is a very powerful person and tried to make Egypt the center of understanding, the center of knowledge, getting all the major works published in Egypt. And that's where we get the Septuagint from. So Egypt, south, okay? Now, why would we call, now, by the way, whenever we think of the Northern Empire, the Northern Kingdom, do you know that the Western kingdoms are actually more to the north than the Northern Kingdom? Okay, so if you were to look at the Middle East and you were to look at Europe, the Western kingdoms were in Europe, but they're more north than the Middle East. I don't know if you're familiar with geography from that area. But the reason the Northern Kingdom is called the Northern Kingdom is because it's north of Israel. Israel, Jerusalem specifically, was right at the border between the Northern Kingdom of Syria and the Southern Kingdom of Egypt. So it's south of Egypt, south of Israel, north of Israel. Are you following everything so far? Again, a lot to keep straight, guys. Good luck. So you're going to have to watch this one again, because again, there's a lot of history lessons, all right? So in verse 6, it says, in the end of years shall they join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. So the king's daughter from Egypt will come to the king of Syria to make a treaty. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. Guys, that is a very specific prophecy. It talks about who will live, who will die, whether the treaty will work, whether the treaty will fail, and how the treaty fails. Okay. So the competition between the kingdom of Syria and the kingdom of Egypt, again, the northern kingdom of Syria, their lines, their battle, their fight would try to have a peace treaty made through a political marriage. Okay. So that's precisely what happens. When Antiochus II and Ptolemy II's daughter, whose name is Bernice, they try to make a political marriage. They say, hey, Antiochus, I want you to marry my daughter Bernice, but you just have to go home and divorce your wife so that my daughter can be the queen. Now, his wife's name, right, is, guess what? Laodicea, which is what the city, we think about the letter to Laodicea. That's what it's written over. That's what it's named. She's named after. So he goes back and he's like, okay, I got to divorce my wife. Do you think his wife was very happy about that? She was not too happy. So what did she do? She poisoned her husband and she had Bernice murdered. So she killed both of them. Okay. So that placed the next leader of the northern kingdom on the throne. So that's Seleucus II, Calcinus. So then we get to verse 7. But out of a branch of her roots, the woman, the Bernice who was killed, right? Out of the branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. So this woman who was killed, someone in her family of the same root is going to take revenge for his sister being killed and the treaty being broken. So that means Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, okay, he invades Syria and he seizes the port of Antioch and overruns the northern kingdom all the way back to Babylon. So you see where there's a constant battle back and forth between these kingdoms. And then verse 8 says, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods and their princes and their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So again, look at how detailed he's getting, even about how long the kings will live, which one's going to live longer. We're getting more and more details, and it may seem overwhelming as we're going through these verses, but whenever you want to prove how accurate something is, you got to get very specific. If I give you a fortune cookie right now, and it says, oh, tomorrow something will happen, well, chances are I'm going to be pretty accurate, right? And then if I say, hey, tomorrow you're going to cough, well, it's a little more accurate, but pretty likely, right? And then if I say, hey, tomorrow a bird is going to land on your head, pick up a worm and shove it in your ear, well, that's pretty darn specific, right? And if that happens, and it actually happens, I've proven to you I know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's what this chapter is all about. That's why these details are so specific. That's why with a history book, you can prove the Bible. So in this case, he says, you're going to bring all the gold and all this stuff, their gods. The king, okay, he carries away 4,000 talents, which is a lot of gold, 40,000 talents of silver, and 2,500 idols. He brings all of this, all of these huge amount of idols was their big spoil, just like verse 8 said. And guess what? His reign was 24 years old, was 24 years in Egypt, whereas the northern kingdom, the guy he was opposing, he only reigned for 20 years. Everything down to the nitty-gritty was fulfilled. Verse 9 and 10. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. But his sons shall be stirred up and shall assemble a multitude of great forces. And one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So the northern kingdom was just spoiled. All this gold, all this silver, all these idols were taken and taken back. 2 years after being spoiled, Seleucus reorganizes his army, the northern kingdom gets the army and marches against Egypt. And he was nearly wiped out during his first attack, just as the verse said. So he goes back to Antioch with just a small amount of his army. His son, Seleucus III, He was murdered, and his other son, Antiochus III, also known as Antiochus the Great, recovers the fortress of his father and mounts this huge war with Egypt. In 312 BC, a large Egyptian army, the kingdom of the south, led by Ptolemy IV, goes through Israel into Lebanon. I actually have been in Lebanon where there's a plaque put up by this king on the wall. It's still there. You can actually see when Napoleon came through. You can see where these ancient Alexandrians came through, where the ancient Egyptians came through under this particular Greek empire. It's pretty cool to see that. So he goes through, and Antiochus, right? He shows up and he has the smaller army. And Antiochus is defeated, and Ptolemy signs a peace treaty with him there over Lebanon and into Israel. And then Ptolemy goes around to Judea, to where Israel is. He goes to Jerusalem. And he's like, I want to see the lands I've just conquered. He tries to go into the temple. He wants to see the Holy of Holies. The priest refuses to let him. Do you think he was very happy about that? He was not, right? So he goes back home to Egypt and he starts persecuting the Egyptian Jews, the Jews that are in Egypt. So then we get to verse 11 through 14. And the king of the south shall be moved with color, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, and the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of the people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So once Ptolemy the fourth, again, the Ptolemies are in the south, the Egyptian kingdom, had died, Ptolemy the fifth takes over. He was 4 years old when he took over. So this guy was obviously very young. And Antiochus is like, well, this is a 4-year-old. I can beat a 4-year-old. So he takes the opportunity and takes this massive army with Philip of Macedon and this group of Egyptians. So just like the alliance said where the people were going to come from to attack, they all fulfilled directly. So when they had taken Judea, the Egyptian mercenary, he actually took Judea as one of his payments. Antiochus, the northern kingdom, takes it back using 100,000 troops. That is a massive army for that time. The population of the world was not even 10% of what it is now. Okay. So is it, yes.
So wait a second. So this is the angel telling Daniel, and this is all
In the future.
him for the future.
Yes. So
The
for
history books are saying.
so the history books prove the accuracy of the biblical prophecy in this special chapter, because this is not a vague prophecy. These are very specific over the battle scenes and even the alliances that will occur. And it's all a play by play. And that's why I said skeptics refused to believe that this was prophecy, but it was all prophetic. Okay. And like I said, listen, guys, I know it's boring. This is more for reference than for you to learn all of this. We'll get to the stuff we want to learn when we end the chapter, when we start talking about the Antichrist. But this is all for reference. So if anyone ever asks you, how can I prove the Bible? Say, well, let's see if the history books line up, and you'll be able to look back at this video or notes or whatever. So verse 15 through 17 says, so the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, a reference to Israel, which by his hand shall be consumed. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him, thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. So notice what he just says. Like he's going to give her the daughter of women, thinking that she's going to help him, but instead she's going to join the other team. So in 197 BC, Antiochus, the king of Syria, okay, he sends out a massive fleet to attack Cilicia, Lycia, and Caria, or Cilicia, Lycia, and Caria, which was controlled by the Egyptians. He sends a bunch of ships. And unfortunately, there was a power that he did not expect. There was another force that was growing in power that he was not ready for. Anyone want to guess what that power was? Rome, okay? Rome starts showing up from this city in Italy called Rome, okay? Antiochus's daughter, her name, Cleopatra. You guys have heard that name, I assume, before. She was given in marriage to Ptolemy. So Antiochus is like, great, I'll send my daughter and she'll convince him to give in to us and make our kingdoms more powerful and give me more power. Well, guess what happened with Cleopatra? She shows up. Remember, by the way, the boy she has to marry, he's only 10 years old. All right, so this is a very different world, okay? So she has to marry them. Well, she goes there and he says, hey, as part of the wedding, part of Syria, all of Phoenicia, which is Lebanon, and part of Judea, which is Israel, right, were to be given as dowry. So as part of the wedding, they had to give that property to the northern kingdom. And the hope was that because Cleopatra marries this young boy, she can influence him so that now her father can come take over all of Egypt as well. He can all become his empire. But what happens with Cleopatra? She becomes a devoted wife to her young husband and stands with Egypt against her father. Okay. I don't know, but I'm sure she wasn't 10. I would assume I don't know exactly how old she was. I'd have to look that one up. Okay, so now Rome shows up, okay? Rome is now a new power he wasn't ready for. So, and it's not quite undefeatable yet. So verse 18 and 19. After this shall he turn his face to the isles and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered him by him to cease. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So in 196 BC, we're getting very close to the time of Christ, Antiochus turns his army's attention on the Roman territories. He turns to try and say, we got to stop Rome from growing and being more powerful. So he seizes part of Thrace, which was a Roman territory. His general from Carthage, his name is Hannibal. And he says, you got to fight the Romans. So in 191 BC, he goes to fight the Romans and he's defeated by the Romans in Thermopylae. In 190 BC, he has an army of 80,000 men. He was again defeated by a Roman general named Lucius Scipio. And they forced him to renounce, so this is the Syrian king, he has to renounce all of his claims in Europe and Asia Minor. For the first time, the king of the north is pushed back and he has to get rid of all his claims in Europe. And he had to pay a tribute of 15,000 talents. Anybody want to guess what that's worth today? It's worth somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 million dollars, okay? If you were to compare it to today's money. So how did he get the money? He started plundering all the temples in the territories that he controlled, which includes, guess which temple? Israel, right? Jerusalem. Okay. So now we're going to see the shift start talking about this other coming king. So verse 20, then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. So Antiochus III is succeeded by Seleucus Philopator. And this guy is a dirtbag. His brother, right, is a hostage. So he says, here, take my son and give me my brother. He gives his son to become a hostage, right? He then heavily taxed Israel to pay the Roman tribute. He essentially put it on the backs of the people of Israel. And his own treasurer murdered him 12 years after he became the ruler. So the treasurer, the guy who was collecting the money, killed him. And his treasurer was kicked out. The treasurer thought, man, I'm going to be the next king is going to love me because I killed the previous king. Well, the next king kicked him out. Antiochus IV said, I don't trust you. You murdered the previous guy. You get out. Okay, so verse 21. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtained the kingdom by flatteries. This guy is important. This guy's name is Antiochus IV. Okay, have you heard the word Antiochus Epiphanes? This is a well-known character in history, and not for good reasons. He was not supposed to be next in line to the throne, but his brother was murdered by that treasurer, and he took the throne with the help of the king of Pergamus. You guys remember Pergamus from the letters Jesus wrote, the king of Pergamum? So he's this terrible person, but he is a pattern of the Antichrist. We're going to see that he is an early type of the Antichrist as we read more. So verse 22, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken. Yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. So Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, he robbed the richest places. He went to anything that was prosperous in his country, and he attacked his enemies when they didn't expect it. He never fought face to face. He would very sneakily go and invade areas and take things over. His two nephews, right, the Ptolemies, they're all related, remember, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the sixth and the seventh, they were competing to control Egypt, so he was free to kind of have his way and take over these different areas. So verse 25 and 26 says, and he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. So Ptolemy the fourth, remember his mother is Cleopatra, okay? He receives bad advice that Antiochus the fourth should be attacked. So Antiochus destroys Ptolemy the sixth, okay, and his army, and then led his brother, and then his brother took Ptolemy the seventh. He then went and took control of the Egyptian throne. So I know this again, keep following the chart, try to follow as best you can. So we have Ptolemy the seventh now, as we go through, and we see that we have this Antiochus Epiphanes just getting more and more powerful. In verse 27 and 28, we read, and both these kings' heart shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. So Antiochus Epiphanes and Ptolemy Philometor, Ptolemy the seventh, they meet together because they're uncle and nephew. And they're trying to make policy and treaties and whatever, but all they do is sit there and lie to one another. They're lying to one another nonstop. So we go on in verse 29 and 30. It says, at the time appointed, he shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So try to keep following along, guys. I know it's tough. I know it's a whirlwind, okay? Believe me, it was not easy preparing this chapter, trying to compress hundreds and hundreds of years of history into an hour talk, half-hour talk. I don't know how long it's been. So Antiochus, again, leader of Syria, he takes a second campaign against Egypt, and he's much less successful. He is unable to take Alexandria because this navy shows up. Who is the navy? The Roman navy. This thorn in the side of this kingdom of the north is this growing power of Rome, okay? Chittim refers to the people of the Mediterranean, the people of Cyprus specifically, okay? The Roman fleet, okay, comes from Cyprus to Egypt after the Romans have victory in Macedonia. So Antiochus, He returns to Syria humiliated. What does he do when he gets back to Syria? Again, according to this, he returns and he is angry with the people of Israel. And he takes out his anger against the Jews. He begins to attack them and hates them. Verse 31 and 32. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries, and the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. So here we have the first abomination of desolation. This is recorded in the book of Maccabees, which is not part of our Bible, okay? But it is a historical book that has a lot of interesting history that we can learn from, okay? It's also recorded in Josephus, who is a historian, a Jewish historian, okay? Jesus tells us that even though the abomination of desolation happened here, there's another abomination of desolation that's yet future. That's in the Olivet Discourse. He talks about it, okay? And the only way you can have an abomination of desolation, the only way you can take the temple, the Holy of Holies, and desecrate it is you must have a Holy of Holies. That is why all of these different prophetic Bible teachers say the temple must be rebuilt, or at least the tabernacle must be built up again. So in this scenario, there's a statue of Jupiter, or Zeus, okay, placed in the Holy of Holies. And the group of people who stand up and try to bring back the truth of the scripture are the Maccabeans. These are the people who revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes. And when they are able to defeat him, they rededicate the temple. And how do they celebrate the rededication of the temple? On December 25th? Christmas, no, Hanukkah, but it happened to be on Christmas, and that's probably one of the reasons we celebrate Christmas. There are some people who say, oh, it had to do with the winter solstice. That actually had nothing to do with it. That's a misconception. So you get to, I'm going to read to you a couple passages just to have a little break from all this prophecy from 2nd Maccabees, okay, to let you hear what they reported about what happened. So 2nd Maccabees chapter 5, verse 11 says, when the news of what happened in Jerusalem reached Antiochus, he thought the whole country of Judea was in revolt. This is talking about their rebellion. And he became as furious as a wild animal. He left Egypt and took Jerusalem by storm, giving his men orders to cut down without mercy everyone they met, and to slaughter anyone they found hiding in the houses. They murdered everyone, men and women, boys and girls, even babies were butchered. 3 days later, Jerusalem lost 80,000 people. 40,000 were killed in the attack, and at least that many were taken away and sold as slaves. But Antiochus was still not satisfied. He even dared to enter the holiest temple in all the world, guided by Menelaus, who had become a traitor both to his religion and to his people. With his filthy and unholy hands, Antiochus swept away the sacred objects of worship and the gifts which other kings had given to increase the glory and honor of the temple. He was so thrilled with his conquest that he did not realize that the Lord had let his holy temple be defiled because of the sin of the people of Jerusalem had made him angry for a while. If the people of Jerusalem had not been involved in so many sins, Antiochus would have been punished immediately and prevented from taking such a foolish action. He would have suffered the same fate as Heliodorus, who was sent by King Seleucus to inspect the treasury. This is now 2 Maccabees 6:6. Not long after that, the king sent an elderly Athenian to force the Jews to abandon their religion and their customs of their ancestors. He wanted them to stop being Jews, to eliminate Judaism from existing. He was also to defile their temple by dedicating it to the Olympian god Zeus. And again, it's also called Jupiter, the false god. The temple on Mount Gerizim was to be officially named the Temple of Zeus and the God of Hospitality, as the people who lived there had requested. The oppression was harsh and almost intolerable. Gentiles filled the temple with drinking and parties and all sorts of immorality. They even had intercourse with prostitutes there. Forbidden objects were brought into the temple, and the altar was covered with detestable sacrifices prohibited by our law. It was impossible to observe the Sabbath, to celebrate any of the traditional festivals, or even so much as to admit as to being a Jew. Each month, when the king's birthday was celebrated, the Jews were compelled by brute force to eat the intestines of the sacrificial animals. Then, during the festival, in honor of the wine god Dionysus, they were required to wear ivy wreaths on their heads and march in procession. On the advice of Ptolemy, the neighboring Greek cities were also instructed to require the Jews to eat their sacrifices. They were told to put to death every Jew who refused to adopt the Greek way of life. It was easy to see that there were hard times ahead. For example, 2 women were arrested for having their babies circumcised. They were paraded around the city with their babies hung from their breasts, and they were thrown down from the city wall. On another occasion, Philip was told that some Jews gathered in a nearby cave to observe the Sabbath in secret. Philip attacked and burned them all alive. They had such respect for the Sabbath that they would not fight to defend themselves. Kind of get an idea how brutal this guy is? And he is the toned down model of the Antichrist. This world's in for a very rough time. And that's from the hand of the Antichrist. What you're going to wait till you see the judgments of God if you haven't been through Revelation against the Antichrist and those who follow him. Okay? So this vile person, do you see where the words vile kind of fit right in, right? He does wickedly against the covenant, meaning he's going to stand against the Jews. And he corrupts them with flattery, right? He gets some of them to turn to him and to reveal their secrets to him so that he can go and chase down all these other Jews. He defiles the fortress of the sanctuary. He stops the sacrifices. He performs the abomination of desolations. He desecrates the Holy of Holies. And even though he did all these things, again, this was the first model. Jesus tells us there's an end time sermon, and the end time sermon, that there's another one coming. He gives warning that whenever you see these things, know that the end has come. The great tribulation is coming. Now, we're going to shift from the historical to us to go to the prophetic to us. By the time we get to the end of the chapter, now I don't know if we'll have time tonight or not, but we'll make a few comments about how this all relates to the Antichrist. So, from Daniel's point of view, he's speaking from the perspective of Israel. Remember, how many weeks was Daniel told are appointed to his people? 70. So he's gone through 69 of the weeks in these conversations. But he's now going to shift over towards the 70th week as we get to the end of the chapter and into chapter 12. Okay? He doesn't realize, or doesn't share that he's realized, that there's a pause between the 69th week of years and the 70th week of years. Okay? So we're going to continue through the prophecies, and now we're going to lead to a time of Roman rule, but it's still going to be talking about this coming world leader. So that's why we see it going straight into the tribulation. But anyway, continuing on to the end of the chapter here. Verse 33. And they that understand among the people. So there are going to be people in Israel at that time that understand the truth. They will teach many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame and by captivity and by spoil many days. Doesn't that sound like what we just read in the Maccabees? Right? So they're going to be believers during that time. And guess what's going to happen during the time of the Antichrist? They're going to be believers. What's going to happen to them? Beheading, right? Persecution. They'll be overcome at that time. Verse 34 and 35. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help. They'll get a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding, those who know the truth, shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, for it is yet a time appointed. What happens, remember, before the throne of God? Right? There's all these different seals. And then I think it's the 5th seal where there are many standing before the throne of God. And they're all dressed in white. And they're all the ones who were killed by the Antichrist. Those who were beheaded, those who were tortured, but they're standing in white. Here we see that there are going to be some that'll be tried and made white, but through death. Right? So this again was embodied by the Maccabees. They're the ones who revolted. They were the ones of understanding historically. But during the end times, we're going to see those who resist Satan, and of course his Antichrist. So great tribulation is coming. And by the way, if I were to read this verse again, I'm going to read two verses to you and tell me if they sound at all similar. So Daniel 11:35, which I just read, some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, to purge them, to make them white, even till the time of the end, because for yet a time appointed. Now we read Luke 21:24. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, be led away captive to all nations. Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Don't they sound like very similar passages of times of suffering? Now, verse 36 through 40 says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself. This king does what he wants, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined, that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Then shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and he shall divide the land for gain. And at that time of the end, so look, we're not talking about now, we're talking about in the end times. The time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. So the Antichrist will come to rule, okay? And at first, the Jews are going to accept him and receive him for 3.5 years. They're going to say, all right, this guy's going to make peace. And he's going to do according to his own will, not according to the will of God. He's not going to follow the God of gods or the God of his fathers. He's going to follow the God of forces. So that means he's going to be opposed eventually by the kingdoms of the south. Now, some people say, what are the kingdoms of the south that oppose the Antichrist? There's a lot of speculation. A lot of speculation, and that's all this is. There's speculation the kingdoms of the south are either the African nations who have largely been converted to Islam, or the Middle Eastern nations who are largely Islam, who initially stand up against the Antichrist. Okay? Nobody knows if that's correct, but that's possibly what's being referenced here. Okay? Verse 41. Says, she shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. Now there's a few countries that he cannot conquer: Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. Isn't that interesting? This is the land of Jordan. Guess where most people speculate the faithful of Israel, not even the faithful, the people who run away from the Antichrist, where do they speculate that they run? Into Jordan, okay, to the area of what we call Petra, because it's so easily defensible and hard to approach with any modern military. It's like inside the mountain. If you're not familiar with it, you should look it up. So he says they go into the rocks and the caves over there. Verse 42 and 43. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his step. So he has power over the treasures of gold and of silver. I wonder if he could control what anyone buys or sells. You guys remember those references, right? Of course, from the book of Revelation. You can see the pictures here that's kind of lining up. Verse 44 and 45 says, but the tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. And yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So something draws this leader, right, this vile, willful king, the guy who does whatever he wants, draws his attention away while he's conquering the African nations, particularly Egypt, while his power is spreading, and he can't conquer these land of Jordan. Something draws his attention. He goes with great fury to make many away. Now, is this some nation that rises up against him and tries to challenge him? Some have speculated that perhaps this is America. Because they want to see America in prophecy, I guess. I don't know.
Probably Epstein.
It might have been. But the point is, some people say, well, maybe America or one of the Americas or maybe the European nations try to challenge this guy. I think the European nations are probably in on it because I think they have to do with the 10 horns, but that's a different conversation. Other people say, well, what if this is the faithful? What if there's a huge revival during that time and his attention is drawn away? And I think this is the more likely scenario because huge portions of the world are turning to Christ. Whenever we see those who are killed in heaven, does anyone remember the exact number that John gives them? Remember, he knew how big a 200 million man army was. How many did he say were killed because of their faith during the tribulation? A number which no man could number. Is that the massive uprising that he sees? I think that's more likely. I don't know, but is that it? Is it the armies of the East? Again, maybe it's the armies of China. Maybe they're the ones who stand against him. I don't know if you know this, but they're not big fans of religion of any kind, right? They don't like that, or at least not their dictators. Who knows? Maybe it's the Jews in Jordan and Petra that upset him. I don't know. So we don't have the details, but massive numbers get his attention and his fury, and he kills huge amounts of people. He is a vile person. But again, we know that Antiochus Epiphanes was vile, but there's someone coming. This vile person is the same as the little horn from Daniel chapter 7 and 8. He's also the same as the beast in Revelation 13. Every single mention of this particular person points to the Antichrist. So let's go through that in the last 5 minutes here. So in Daniel chapter 7, verse 20, says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. So there was a small horn that took down 3 of the 10 horns that were there in this particular creature. So what is the purpose of this little horn? What does Daniel 7 tell us he's going to do? Well, in verse 25 of Daniel 7, it says, he shall speak great words against the Most High. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He shall think to change the times and the laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of a time. So for 3.5 years, this little horn will be openly attacking God and all the saints of God and trying to change the times. So for 3.5 years, that's the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. What about in Daniel chapter 8? Daniel chapter 8, this little horn again from this Greek Empire, verse starting in Daniel 8, verse 10 to 14, says, and it waxed great even to the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. Even the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint that said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, and then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So again, we have another period of time after the abomination of desolation, for 3.5 years, just another way of saying 3.5 years, he will cast down the host and some of the stars of heaven to the ground. He will cast down the place of God's sanctuary, also known as the Holy of Holies. He's going to desecrate the temple. He will cast down the truth to the ground. He's going to corrupt any messages of salvation, trying to corrupt the gospel. He will oppose the daily sacrifices. They'll have to stop making sacrifices. Now, again, are these events during history or during prophecy? Well, it's during prophecy. Even in Daniel chapter 8, he says in verse 17, so he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, For at the time of the end shall be the vision. I'm talking about the end times, is what Gabriel tells him. And in verse 19, he says, Behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. So they were about the end times. And then in Daniel 11, which we just read, what does this vile person do? Well, verse 31. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of his strength. And he shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, and the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. So he defiles the sanctuary, takes away the sacrifice, places the abomination of desolation, does wickedly against the Jews, corrupting with flattery. And again, when does this happen? At the appointed time. That's from verse 36. So Antiochus did come and do stuff, but he was not at the end times. Even afterwards, Daniel continues to get the prophecies, okay? So in Daniel chapter 11, verse 40, says, And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass. Specifically, this king does his own will. He builds himself up. He exalts himself. He speaks blasphemies. He prospers until his era is over, till he's finished. And he doesn't regard God, and he doesn't regard women. He's not interested in either. Okay? And people have different speculations on what that means. But the point is, he doesn't regard either, but he lifts himself up. He's very conceited about himself. And he comes to an end without anyone helping him. Okay? And that's all in Daniel 11, verse 36. And then finally, in Revelation 13, the last group of passages we see about the Antichrist, in verse 5 through 8, he's described as a beast. And the beast has 10 horns. And it's overruled. It's ruled over by one little horn that destroys 3 of the other horns. So Revelation 13, verse 5 through 8 says, And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given to him to continue 42 months. And he opens his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Notice something, by the way, for those of you who are unsure as to when the rapture happens. He says he blasphemes God, his name, his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. Who's he blaspheming? Dead people? No, he's blaspheming people that were raptured. You don't blaspheme dead people, say, oh, you can't believe them. He's blaspheming people who were taken out of the earth. The rapture, pre-tribulational, is all over the scripture. Otherwise, you got a lot of explaining to do with verses like this. He says, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. So there's those that dwell in heaven, and there's still saints on the earth. He says that, and it was given war to make war with the saints to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So this final beast, this Antichrist, speaks blasphemies, makes war with the saints, overcomes them, and hates those that already were taken to heaven, right? He has authority over this world, and his authority after the abomination of desolation continues 3.5 years, okay? So I know that was a whirlwind tour. Who says they got 20% of that? Anyone? 20%? No? Okay. It's one that's worth looking back over. Anyone have any final questions, comments, thoughts? I know you're all eager to see the State of the Union, I suppose. Anyone online have any questions? All right, guys. Very good. You guys are